Hey now, it's Brace for Impact Extra, and I'm your host, Mike Gilbert, and I'm here, as always, joined by JD, once bit a man in a fight, Oliva. How you doing, JD?
It wasn't once.
Was
It happened a couple
uh,
times.
were they at least tasty, JD?
I don't recall. All I know is like one time I body locked a guy and his chest was there and it was bad. Another time an ear was there and who hasn't bit a man in a fight?
You know, I'm
Just me and A Steel. Okay.
I've I've bitten other people, but in very different situations than a fight. So
Oh,
so hey, before we get started here, I want to I we're not going to talk about Impact on this show. So this is just BFI Extra. This is just JD and I kind of going off of the cuff, talking about a major story in professional wrestling. We do cover some of the AEW, sometimes WWE, some like extra events on our Patreon. But with everything going on, JD and I were talking all day, and we're like, man, this would be a fun podcast to do. So we reached out to Garrett. And Garrett, we also talked to our brethren in Fight Game Media. So I want to give a big shout out to the Power Bombshells and to the Boom and to the Dynamite show. They actually did a killer show last night covering All Out, and they got into a little bit of this drama, but a lot of what we're about to talk about today did not come out until after they were already off the air. So this is new information post CM Punk scrum that we're going to really get into. So I want to give them a shout out for allowing us to have a little bit of fun jumping into their world, talking about some CM Punk drama and some AEW drama. Because I'll be honest, JD, seeing all this stuff play out, knowing that this week I had to talk about fucking Heath, I was getting super jealous of our AEW friends. I really was. I'm like, it's so boring compared to what we got to talk about this week.
oh yeah.
I'm like, I really wanted to just sink my teeth into this story because I think it's right up our alley, even though it's not really the subject matter that we typically cover. So I want to give a shout out to everybody that allowed us to do this.
Bro, I'm in the arena, right? I was there. I'm at the show.
Yeah.
When I hung out with, I went to the Observer lunch at Texas Day Brazil and Woodfield Mall, my hometown mall. So it was like great to have all the Observer and Fight Game folks out for this awesome event, and I'm having a great time with my kid. And man, that ending angle was just great. I get in the car to drive home, and I'm like, I'm gonna listen to the scrum. I want to hear what everybody has to say after the show. And I went, oh my God, driving home.
Wow.
I texted Garrett. I'm like, holy shit. And he's like, oh yeah, the show was good. I'm like, no, you're not listening to the scrum right now, are you? And he was like, be right back. It was madness. But I feel like we have to talk about this.
Yeah, and I feel like we are just as good as anybody to be able to talk about some of this. So I want to
And make
recap a little
jokes,
bit of what
more importantly.
and make jokes, absolutely. I want to recap just a little bit of what they said during the scrum. I know that it was covered on the Power Bombshells, but just in case you've been living under a fucking rock, CM Punk went nuclear. One of the stories, a lot of the initial stories came out said that CM Punk was responding to a question about Cole Cabana. Wrong. He actually just sat down and saw Nick Hausman, who was just completely innocent. He was just kind of like right there, and he looked at him and immediately got into
Do you
the
know
Cole
why?
Cabana stuff.
That people aren't talking about this. Do you know why he picked Nick Hausman?
Well, because I know Nick, so I did follow Nick Hausman's stuff because he was there during the trial and was on the scene, and he actually got interviews with both of them.
Not just that. He's a Chicago improv guy.
Yeah, well, yeah, and so CM Punk
Yeah.
did reference that, and because he was wanting to call out Nick Hausman for being friends with Cole Cabana whenever he was talking about the story, saying that you should disclose that information before you're doing a story. I agree with him, by the way. Nick Hausman's rebuttal to that was saying, I have not been friends with Scott Colton in a long time, so that wouldn't be accurate for me to say that I'm friends with him. But if he has a relationship, there is a relationship there, and that should be disclosed. I didn't know that until Punk called it out.
Here's the thing, and this is what I tweeted last night, because I see that so many people want to pick sides. Like, anyone listening to the vast majority of people that are listening to this or that follow professional wrestling in general, we don't know any of these people personally. We don't know them. Like, you shouldn't cap, I believe is the term the kids use, is what I hear my high school kids say all the time. You shouldn't, like, that's what they say, like, when you're like,
okay,
yeah, it's called capping.
Yeah.
Took me 2 years to learn.
When I was a kid, busting a cap in someone's ass was a bit different than cap now.
It meant something much different.
Yeah.
Like Cap would be like, you're taking up for someone when you shouldn't. Right? This is what I
Okay.
if I'm wrong on this, please inform the middle-aged white guy. So yeah, anyways, like don't go to war for dudes that don't know you exist. Right?
Yeah.
And it's silly to do that. Like, because there are no heroes, and none. There are no heroes in any of this, which is what makes
No.
this such great fodder for drama.
Yes, yes. So he immediately he sees Houseman and he wants to get right into the Cole Cabana stuff. And you could tell that this has been weighing on him for a long time. He's kept quiet the entire time. I get the feeling there's NDAs in play here that it was probably why neither him or Cabana have ever said anything publicly.
Possible.
And he just looked like he had reached his breaking point and he knew that he wanted to talk about it at this scrum. I think just judging by Tony Khan's demeanor during it, I think he knew that CM Punk was going to talk about Cabana because he wanted to just clear the air. But then all hell just ends up breaking loose. He says that he hasn't been friends with Cole Cabana in a long time, that their friendship ended in 2014, and it should have ended a lot sooner than that. And based off of the lawsuit, I don't want to get too into the weeds on the lawsuit, but he said he's not friends with him, and it's nobody's business why they're not friends, and that he's embarrassed that he's even got to talk about it. And his point was that the reason why he has to talk about it is because they have some EVPs, i.e., which he referenced later, the Young Bucks, that want to leak stuff to the media, saying that he was the one that got Cole Cabana fired and that got Cole Cabana sent to ROH. And that's what spiraled all of this stuff. So that story comes out earlier this year. Hangman references it in a promo back in May. He did not clear that with CM Punk. That's obviously a sticking point with CM Punk. CM Punk was caught off guard on that, and it led to not confrontation, but not like it led to a meeting with Tony Khan, and he did not feel like the apology was good enough. So, which led to the promo that we saw a couple weeks ago when Punk first came back, where he called out Hangman Page in the middle of the ring, knowing that Hangman Page wasn't going to be able to come to the ring because Hangman Page had no idea this was coming. Okay, so now we got a little bit of the backstory. So where the issue comes into play is that he referenced CM Punk, or CM Punk referenced the Young Bucks, saying that they're the ones that were leaking this information to the press and that it was false information, that he had fuck all to do with Cole Cabana getting fired. Sean Ross Sapp has since come out and said that the Young Bucks were not the ones that leaked that to him. Well, what Sean Ross Sapp fails to mention, hold on. What he fails to mention is, yes, it might not have come directly from the Young Bucks through a text exchange or a phone call, but it could have went through one of their intermediaries. He did not say that it didn't go to one of them. So they could have said it to one of their people who then leaked it to the press. That stuff happens all the time. You remember James Comey? You remember James Comey?
Very vividly, actually, yes.
Yeah, the FBI director, whenever his memo got leaked of his meetings with Donald Trump, right? Well, it got leaked to the New York Times. It wasn't Comey that leaked it. Comey sent it to somebody else to get it leaked to so that stuff happens all the time.
Constantly.
So this stuff like CM Punk believes that it came from the Young Bucks. I think that is a real possibility. I don't know for a fact. I just like CM Punk seemed to be pretty adamant, and Tony Khan didn't correct it. Seems like that could be a possibility. So that's where this comes into play. He ends up going all in on he ends up going in on Hangman Page, calling him an empty-headed idiot, saying he didn't deserve to be treated that way, and that the apology was crap. And then he went in on a bunch of other topics, but that was basically the gist of the scrum. So hold on, let me take a drink of water.
While you're doing that, I'll step up.
I
don't think he was meant Sean Ross Sapp necessarily, because he called out Brian Alvarez moments later. I think he meant
he called him out later for saying that he went into business for himself and was being pretty insidious about that.
But I'm pretty sure that's because yeah.
Well, who has a finishing maneuver called the Meltzer driver?
I mean,
so he might have been, and he did call out Dave. He did call out Dave, and later in the thing, he did call out Brian Alvarez. He didn't mention Sean Ross Sapp one iota, but the initial story came from Sapp, so that's why Sapp addressed it, that it wasn't the Young Bucks that gave him that story. I think it was verified by other sites, but Sapp was the initial guy to say all this. Okay, and that's why I just stuck with him specifically, because where a lot of this information is actually coming from his website, Fightful Select.
But you and I both know that journalists will often have stories, but don't go with them for one reason or because things aren't corroborated or things aren't verified. or
We learned that just last night, my brother, because I had
It's-
information that I wasn't allowed to say that ended up getting pulled out later, which I will talk about. But
that's as accurate.
yeah, this is accurate. So anyway, after the scrum ends, and I want to go to, I actually have some bullet points because what I didn't want to do is do a play-by-play. So somebody on Reddit put the bullet points in here, and I guess the reporters from Fightful Select, but PW Insider's talking about it, Meltzer's talking about it, everybody's talking about it. They all got kind of similar stories that after Punk was done at the scrum, he goes back to his locker room where he was then confronted by the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. Punk and the Bucks got into a physical altercation, and then on the side, Kenny Omega, and Ace Steel had a separate altercation. Ace Steel then cracked Nick with a steel chair, and then one person saying he's lucky that he in real life. One person saying he's lucky he isn't in jail. I wonder if it was a gimmick chair or a real chair. Sorry. Several people in the company believe that he will not be back. I think I think the news will probably drop eventually, but he's already gone. I think
He's gone.
I don't know that for a fact. I just people are saying that he's likely gone. Okay. Security called, and there were a lot of people, with one person saying they were trying to save lives. A little dramatic. Maybe that's true. But there was a lot of heat on Ace Steel. Then the argument continued with a lot of cursing and shouting until the Elite left. Some were siding with Punk, some were siding with the Elite, but most seem to think that Punk should have expected to be approached about his comments. And people were wondering where FDR was during, where they were at during this whole thing. Didn't seem like they were invited to the scrum, so they were out drinking, so they weren't even around.
Good for them.
So yeah, good for them. They weren't a part of it, because if they were a part of it, I think it would have been a bad night for the Young Bucks. I don't know. Just making a prediction there. I saw old Cash Wheeler knock out a dude that attacked Bret Hart one time. So
that was the thing that actually did happen.
Yeah, and I think he might have gotten sued for that. So there's lots to unpack here. I know we don't want to go on forever, so I have some pretty interesting thoughts about this. JD, you go ahead and go first, and then I will talk.
So this is one reason I want to do this, because I think you and I are in. I think the big problem here is leadership, right? I don't want to make judgments on people, but I do see a lack, not a lack. Yeah, I'll say it. There's a lack of leadership going on over here, and you and I are both in different positions. I work with high school kids. I'm a teacher, coach. You work with young men in the military, so we've both taken a role in shaping people.
Men and women, absolutely.
Me, it's just young men. That said, right, I had a situation I thought about a few years ago. We had a kid that I was, and again, I'll tell you a story. I got a kid a few years ago who was a state champion, a national champion, young. He achieved every goal he ever had at the age of 16, right? And then after that, he was like done, checked out. He was kind of a problem, not a huge problem, but his senior, he became a big problem. He was really heavy, and he was ineligible, and he got eligible his senior year, his second semester of his senior year. And we had this big dual team tournament that we host, and we had a conversation with his dad. His dad wanted him to wrestle a weight class that we thought was really bad for him. We're like, no, he's not going to be good there. It's not good for our team. We don't need him there. And they were like, well, he's the best kid, blah, blah, blah. So I came up with this idea. I said, here's what we got to do. We're number 2 of the state right now. We're going to wrestle the number 1 team. Let's let him wrestle this weight class. He's going to get embarrassed. He's going to lose. He's going to get embarrassed in front of everybody. We'll have proven our points. So we did that. We put him out there, and I'll be damned if the kid wasn't winning by 8 points 25 seconds into the match. And I was like, well, I'm going to eat this. But then, then he was winning by 6 points. Then he was winning by 1 point. Then he was losing by 4 points. And then I went out there. He's down by 6 points, like beginning of the third period. And I look at me, hey, man, we're okay. He looks at me and goes, no, we're not. I don't got it. He's like, I'm getting my ass kicked, and that's okay. And I said, okay. And I went back and sat down. I'm like, it's bad. I proved my point. But here's what happened. We didn't express our plan to everybody. We just, as the coaching staff, like, this is what we're going to do. So the parents and the other kids in the team thought that we were favoring this kid and removing a good, hardworking kid from the lineup. They thought that we bent over and gave this kid exactly what he wanted, when what I wanted was for him to go out there and get embarrassed. But what wound up happening is we wound up losing the team for a couple weeks on that. Even after we proved our point that this is what we wanted, it still caused a whole lot of problems. And I think it was a big reason we kind of fell short of what we should have been that year. So that was my genius idea on how to manage people, and it didn't work. It actually backfired. So I couldn't, and I deal with teenagers. I couldn't imagine having to balance the egos of millionaires.
Yeah, especially like alpha
Mhm.
males and alpha females, type A personalities, and especially whenever you got these two factions in that seemingly in the promotion right now, where you got the AEW originals and the clique, so to speak, the elite, those guys that have kind of built it from the ground up, and then you got these famous guys that were signed later. And one of them in CM Punk, he doesn't really dabble in bullshit. He
No.
he doesn't do that stuff. And when you try to get over on him, this is how he reacts. And a lot of people are piling onto Punk, and I think some of it is deserved. I think that he was
So
unprofessional, and
mhm.
I'm gonna get to that. I'm gonna get to that. But it seems like punches were thrown in that altercation, the melee, so to speak, where Nick Jackson was
Melee.
punched specifically. Chairs were thrown. Somebody was hit with a chair. Steel apparently bit Kenny Omega, and that was the thing that I heard about last night that I was sitting on all day, and I was like, yeah, why can't I talk about that? That's so cool. It's the craziest story that's happened in wrestling in a long, long time. Um, and what I got to say is I'm gonna get to Punk. Well, I'm gonna talk about a failure in leadership from AEW side, their management
Mhm.
crew, most specifically the EVPs, who get a pass. They really do, because they are so beloved by the fan base, and they help create this company. All their bullshit gets overlooked,
Yep.
and I think it gets overlooked by the media because they've been kind of media darlings. But they've been pulling stuff like this for a long time, where they're leaking information, backbiting, and putting out stories and things like that. And a lot of other people they're just now starting to talk about it, but they didn't have a strong personality like CM Punk to be willing to go ahead and confront them, because right now he's got fuck you money, and he's
Mhm.
in a position where he is not afraid of those guys. They can be EVPs all they want. He is going to stand up for himself by any means necessary, and we saw that last night.
I,
So I think they've been pulling some crap for a while. If it's true, and Tony Khan did not rebut it, if it's true that they were leaking this stuff to the press to try to make him look bad, and that they confronted him in the back, and then a fight ensued, effective immediately, I would strip their EVP status, because that was fake status anyway. I know they had certain office jobs, but you can't be an office employee and get into a fight with a talent. You just can't. If CM Punk's shitting on you in public, you got to eat that if you're an office employee, or you go through HR, or you go through something else, or you go to Tony Khan. What you don't do is go get into a fight. And regardless of who threw the first punch, when you went there and you had that altercation, you knew that a fight could happen, because this guy was fired up, right? If they're leaking to the press, if they're putting these stories out there, if they're backbiting, they're doing all this stuff, and then they got into a fight with a top talent, they EVP status. I'm not talking about a wrestler under contract. I'm talking EVP status. They got to go, right? All three of them. Boom. That's got to be done. So that's a failure in their leadership, because they're trying to be one of the boys when they have office jobs, and that just doesn't work. It doesn't work out very well. Which job is more important to you, being office or being a wrestler? You're going to have to choose. I think Tony should choose that for them. And another failure in leadership is Tony Khan himself. I watched this man sit there while CM Punk trashed so many different people in his company. MJF, I couldn't tell if that was a work or not. I couldn't
yeah,
tell
I'm
if he was
pretty
just
sure that's
doing
working.
business there.
Pretty
I
sure that's
think I
working.
think he's interweaving work and shoot
Mhm.
there, but he destroyed Adam Page so bad to where Adam Page, I don't think you can book him as a top babyface for a long time. That guy is done. I think that he was squashed so bad, and he has not done anything to defend himself. And I know that maybe I could be a little dramatic, but I think that guy's done as a top babyface for a long time. And we saw him trash the EVPs. He's putting out secrets. He's doing all kinds of crazy stuff. He went after Cole Cabana's mom. You know what I mean? That's another employee in there that works for them. And honestly, the stuff that if he wanted to confront the Cole Cabana situation and get it off his chest, that's fine. Because I think that had been weighing on him, but he didn't need to trash every other person in the company to get to that point. And Tony Khan let it happen. He sat there. He didn't put a stop to it. He didn't cut it off. He didn't do anything. I think a stronger leader would have put a stop to the situation very quickly. CM Punk is a subordinate, and you should be treated as such at times, right? When he's doing wrong. I know he's the top star in the company. He's the moneymaker, but you got to step in and you got to shut that shit down immediately. And he did not. He sat there, he nodded, and really he kind of came off like a chicken shit to me,
He
my
really did.
opinion.
No, he really did.
That's my, like, if as a guy that's been in leadership, if I had somebody that was pointing fingers and slinging arrows at other people on the team, I'd shut it down immediately. And then of course I'd pull them back in a back room, and then we'd hash things out like professionals. He
Mhm.
did it in the public square when it really should have been done behind a closed door. And Tony Khan didn't put a stop to it. And then he didn't rebut it afterwards. He's letting all of this information out there about his EVPs to where now they have, if they didn't have credibility before when he was saying all, they have no credibility as office employees now. I think they're done. Given everything that was said, the fact that Tony Khan didn't back him up, and the fact that they got into the fight afterwards, I think those guys are done. Now, CM Punk, unprofessional, obviously, but he is not an office employee. He's not an EVP, and I felt like they should, like Tony Khan and the EVP should have squashed this a long time ago. Being in a leadership position, they should have pulled this guy aside and made him content, and they were not doing that. And when people don't communicate, things get to this boiling point and a guy bursts, and they saw that happen last night. So I think one person was in control of this situation, and that was CM Punk. But a lot of other people could have squashed this before it got to this point, and they didn't do it. But CM Punk, if he wants to be a locker room leader, like he says he is, like he tried to be in WWE and did not, and could not get to that point, he comes here, he's immediately the top guy, and he wants to be a locker room leader, and he wants to be taken seriously, and he wants these people to take his advice. You can't do stuff like this. You can't be a leader and then trash people in public the way that you did. You praise in public and you criticize in private. That's how leaders do it.
Yep.
That's the only way it's got to be done. And what he did was wrong. It was unprofessional. I think there's a lot of people to blame, but he was the one that was in control of the situation, and he lost control, and it shouldn't have happened.
I agree wholeheartedly with everything you just said. I told that story about our coaching issue earlier because I think we handled it the right way. I think our mistake was not communicating the plan to the team and letting at least the captains know, and the kid who's being benched for one match, why this was happening. Right? Like, usually you don't have to do that with everybody, but I mean, at the same time, communication is vital, right, to any functioning team. Right? And the days of do as I say, not as I do are over. Right?
Nope.
You can't do that. You need to be, and this is, again, mistakes get made, but you need to tell. I think this was a problem that Tony Khan should have bit a year ago, because we all knew there was issues with Cabana and Punk years ago. Hey, you know what? It might have been a bad idea for him to do that podcast.
Oh, yeah. Most expensive podcast in history.
Might have been a bad idea. And he won. Like, this is what he should have done is he should have sat the two of them down and said, look, you guys don't like each other. What is going to happen? Like, can we do this, or do people have to go? And lay out the expectations immediately.
Expectations is an important word. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Sorry. No, it's like, you need to do that. You need to set a tone. And when it comes to leadership positions, you have to say, look, what can we do? Can you guys be around each other? No, then something has to be done. Right. And then people still wouldn't have liked it, but then you don't get the snippy. Right. And I think I think there's a lot of parallels that can be drawn with Survivor Series 97, because Vince McMahon's leadership, people are like, oh, this would never happen in WWE. This happened a lot in WWE. Like, we just didn't have Twitter back then, you dorks. Like,
Brock Lesnar walked out on the show recently.
Like a month ago or something like that. This happens, right? And this is what leadership comes from, is like, Vince McMahon let that whole situation. He actually fueled that situation. He wanted those two guys at each other's throats because he thought it was good for him. I think Tony Khan mistakenly thought he could do the same thing here. And Vince, say which one of Vince McMahon, the dude's an alpha, right? Dude's an alpha. Tony Khan's not an alpha. And I'm not saying this in like this macho kind of way, but there's guys that are leaders. I think Tony Khan's a hell of a businessman. I think he's clearly very smart, but I don't think he's that kind of guy. You know,
he's an analytics guy. He's a wrestling fan, and you know what I mean. So it's like, and it takes a different type of breed to gain control of stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And he's sitting there and he's in awe of CM Punk.
Yeah,
he's in awe of him.
And
Punk's cutting the goddamnest promo I've ever heard in my life, and it's real. Right. And he's just sitting there watching it. And I'm just like, and I get being in awe. Like, the guy's impressive, but you're the boss, Tony. You gotta cut that shit off.
And people, I hate to give the Jim Cornettes of the world credit, but he was right about this. He said this guy is in over his head. And to be frank, the fact that it hasn't happened earlier is impressive. Right.
Well,
it has, but not publicly.
Not publicly. Well, and they were bringing in a lot of talent that were, I would say, subservient I don't know if that's the right word, but to the EVPs, where they were never trying to trample over the EVPs. And you had kind of Jericho brought him in, who was friends with those guys, and he's like, Jericho just wants to do Jericho stuff. He doesn't want to get involved in any of the other
And
stuff.
same with
And so,
Moxley.
same with Moxley. Moxley wants to keep to himself.
Mm-hmm.
Punk's not that guy,
Nope.
and you can't pull bullshit with Punk because this is what happens when you do that.
And this is the thing too. Not like one thing about, and I mentioned this a couple weeks ago too, is so many people rally behind people whose Twitter feed they like, right? Who have really good matches, and they equate that to being a good person. When you don't know what these people are like, we have no idea what any of these people are like behind closed doors, right? Every single one of these guys has a carefully crafted social media image. You don't know the
Mhm.
real guy. This is still pro wrestling, right? It's still pro wrestling. But Tony Khan, like, Vince McMahon, I talked about this with our good buddy Garrett today during lunch. Vince McMahon was the hatchet man in WWF for years, but he always left that to other people. Like, remember how everybody hated Nick Khan a few months ago for all these budget
Yeah.
cuts? That Nick Khan just keeps getting rid of people. And Carl Anderson is going, Paul Heyman got rid of me. Like I rather than just being like, oh yeah, it's clearly the boss, because all of a sudden we don't have budget problems in WWF or WWE anymore, right? All of a
Mhm.
sudden those are gone now that Vince McMahon's gone. But where he was smart was he was able to babyface himself and work the talent into mental knots constantly. And they talked about that locker room being on eggshells. No one's on eggshells in AEW, and that's a good thing. But at the same time, there's no respect for the chain of command either.
Right. Yeah, and I think that that's the big problem, and he is going like he sounded real tough talking about WWE, putting out events on his weekend. He sounded real tough during that, because those are people that you're not confronting in your face,
Yep.
right? Like he can confront those situations with money. You can't confront these people with money. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
he was saying, hey, I have a lot more money than Jim Crockett Promotions. I'm not going to put up with WWE shit. Okay, but now you got to get your own house in order. That's where you really need to focus.
But what's he doing?
Because
He's lashing out, right? And this is
yeah,
what people do. This is what people do when they can't control a situation. Is they're really angry, but they're projecting their problems onto something else. Like there's something they think they can control. Or in Tony's case, like money's never been an issue, right? So
right.
I'm not going to make a judgment of the guy. It's like he tries to solve solutions with money, but sometimes it kind of sounds like that's how he tries to solve solutions.
Well,
You
his
know,
his comment about I'm Jim Crockett Promotions, but I got a lot of more money than Jim Crockett, and I'm not going to put up with this shit. You know what I mean? So that sounded like he's throwing his money around to solve
it,
that problem.
it is, and he's right. They do have a lot more money than Jim Crockett. Like people compare them to WCW when they really should compare them to Jim Crockett. It's much more that type of an organization. But that
Right?
was the problem with Jim Crockett, right? Was
Yeah.
leadership. Is Jim Crockett
Well,
let everybody else run the place but him, especially those
Dusty.
last couple
Yeah.
years. Dusty was a huge problem. By the way, if you say anything bad about the Rhodeses ever, people come at you. Do you ever notice that? You ever
Yeah.
criticize the Rhodeses, people get angry.
Yeah. They lose their joy real quick when you do that.
Oh, now I can't go back to work. It's an inside joke. Yeah, it's funny to me that that's the thing. Like that dude helped spend Jim Crockett out of money, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't have an accountant, and he didn't have an accountant that would tell him, "Hey, man, there's a problem." So I mean, this
Yeah.
this is one of those situations. Like there's not communication, right? If Tony doesn't know things are that bad, which is possible he doesn't, because he gets so wrapped up, he's got 3 other jobs. It's entirely possible he didn't know things were this bad until recently, which is his
Yeah.
problem, right? There's
Yep.
who's underneath him. Like who you need to have a bad cop in there somewhere, right? And it's hard to do that with millionaires, right?
Hmm.
It's real hard. But there has to be a guy there who can say, "Nah, man, this isn't going to work for us for this reason." Right? And I don't
Yeah.
know who that is, but I'm not saying you got to be Bill Watts and make everybody miserable just by your presence. But there has to be something in the middle. Like, I don't know what that is, because WWE is a place where, again, people walked on eggshells for years, and now they're going through their honeymoon period again. Everything's
Hmm.
new over there. But it's interesting to me. I told you I got a WWE source, right?
Yeah.
We talked this morning, and because he reached out to me after I made that little tweet about don't trust these dudes. And he's like, "Oh, I
Right.
saw you and your little guy had a good time last night." I said, "Yeah, we did, man." And then I heard the presser, and he said, "Yeah, I'm mad too, because like now I have to go to a breakfast meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning." So they're meeting about this too. They know
Yeah.
what's going on. But I mean, like, so this is like it's news, and they're if you didn't want to give WWE any advantages in this quote unquote war, you failed last night, big time.
Yeah, you did because a lot of people were pretty upset. Not as many people as I thought would be upset that Drew lost to Roman. I personally was upset. But a lot of WWE fans were like, "Oh no, we kind of half expected that Roman because they're going to keep him strong either for The Rock or for Cody Rhodes." And I'm like, I'm baffled, but I guess because I've been disconnected from WWE for a while, I just assumed that hey, we're going to make every right decision from now on, and this would be the right decision for the people in that place. And they went against that, and they pulled an old school WWE, thus turning me off again from their TV show. Although I did watch a little bit tonight.
If Roman,
Um,
here's the thing: if Roman Reigns keeps the belt for 2 years and he's a heel who crushes everybody, it's bad. But if you don't make the audible to put the belts on the scissor guys who nobody knew were that over till last night, you're the worst booker in the world.
I know, yeah. Some people think that AEW is worse for not calling an audible mid match. Give me a break. But so
Yes,
I
they should
thought
throw away all their plans because the Acclaimed were super over tonight.
right.
Dorks.
Yeah, no, so I thought that I was like, oh wow, WWE's really taking a beating here. AEW, all they have to do is put on a good show,
They had it.
send the crowd home happy. And they did. They had a
They
really
had it.
good main event. And I'll leave it up to people who decide who was better, Punk versus Moxley or Roman versus Drew. I hear both people saying that both were better, and that's fine.
Art is
Hey,
subjective.
yep, vanilla. What? Well, like Triple H told Ariel Helwani, you got chocolate and vanilla. It's all ice cream. So hey, whatever floats your boat.
Mhm.
But then they had that incredible moment with MJF coming out, which tore the house down. And
Absolutely
they and
did.
they had it. And they had it. And I was like, I kind of had forgotten that Punk and Page had these issues. I wasn't even thinking about it anymore. I was like, oh, big kumbaya. It's like we're gonna have a pop a big rating this week with this MJF stuff, and people are already forgetting that MJF came out because Punk went nuclear on the presser.
Well, it's funny because MJF did the exact same thing to Wardlow.
He did. Yeah,
Right, it
yeah.
was the exact same thing, so it's kinda like,
Yeah.
turnabout is fair play, but, like, at the same time, FTR's out there tweeting, "Oh, yeah, we bonded the locker room bonded over," I forget what one of those Fightful
Some
girls,
whiskey.
some whiskey or something like that, but they
Yeah.
say, "Yeah, we actually bond the locker room was bonding together for the first time in a long time," and I'm like, "Well, if
Right.
those guys are saying it, clearly things were better. Maybe for most people, they are getting better, but at the very top, it's not, and that's what it is.
Right.
It's your big it's not surprising. This is stuff like Hogan and Nash had these problems. We talked about Hart and Michaels. Like, it is not crazy for the big, Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan famously hated each other. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't crazy to have this. What's crazy is that CM Punk made it such a public display. That's what's crazy.
Yeah. That's the crazy part. He made it public. It led to a big brawl, and a lot of this could have been alleviated by first, I'm gonna say first Punk could alleviated a lot of this stuff if he would have just been forthcoming with everybody and say, look, here are the things that you just don't bring up to me. This is what you don't bring up. Um, Page went into business for himself. Clearly, that clearly ticked Punk off. Um, but sometimes if you hold someone to an expectation that they don't know about, then that's going to create a resentment that you can carry for a long time. You got to put your expectations out there. You got to let people know what's expected of them.
Let-
So and Punk and Page might have known that he shouldn't have
that's
done that.
that's what I'm saying.
Right?
It's like
It's very likely, but if you don't communicate that, it's hard to hold someone to that standard. It's hard to hold someone to a standard that
you're
they
right.
don't know exists.
You're right.
And maybe Page was just trying to sell tickets, right, and get under Punk's skin a little bit and create a moment and get people talking. And he didn't expect the reaction that he got and doesn't know how to verbalize that stuff. I have no idea. I don't know Adam Page from I just don't know the guy.
Don't know
So
from Adam.
who knows from Adam? Yeah, I was gonna say from Adam. So, but when you got to set a standard out there, and if you're gonna hold people to a standard, they got to know what that standard is. They got to know what that expectation is. So you got to get those expectations out there. And my advice to Punk and to anybody is you got to let go of resentments, right? It will kill you. And a thing that me and my folk say is when you're holding on to a resentment is like drinking poison, hoping the other person's gonna die, right? Like the way you get rid of those resentments is you gotta confront the issue like a professional behind closed doors and get it squashed. And if the person doesn't give you a good enough apology, that's okay. You got to forgive them anyway. You got to let it go. That doesn't mean you be best friends. That doesn't mean you forget. right? But you gotta let that stuff go, because if not, it's just gonna eat you alive inside, and it's gonna create moments like this, like
Mhm.
we saw just last night, to where now we have this big civil war going on in the locker room. Ace Steel is likely fired. I don't know that for a fact. Who is one of CM Punk's best friends? He's out of a job, right? CM Punk probably should be suspended. The EVPs should all be fired from their positions, right? And suspended as talent. Like, this whole thing is a complete mess, and it ruined a completely great night for them, for that company, and for
Mhm.
professional wrestling, and turn it into this chaos, which is really good for you and me, honestly.
Honestly, it's great. It could wind up good for their ratings too, because you
Yeah.
got more interest and people it worked for WWE when Vince McMahon turned out to be a rapist. I don't know why we don't use that word, but that's what it
Yeah.
was. When the term
Yep.
non-consensual sex gets thrown around, people started watching because they were curious how they're going to address it.
Yeah.
So we could have really good Dynamite ratings this week. I mean, I'm more curious to see how they're going to handle it and to see who's not on the show more than who's on the show. Tony Khan likes to play with reality, but doesn't actually like to embrace reality. Like, they don't give injury reports. They don't talk about when people need time off. Malachi Black apparently either
He's
leaving or taking a temporary
he's
leave. Nobody
yeah.
knows for sure. You know,
Yeah. I think
hopefully he
Sap
gets better.
reported that earlier, that he's probably out for a little while.
Yeah, I mean,
But
like
who
in the,
knows? Who
it
knows for how
sounds
long?
yeah, it sounds like he needs to get healthy mentally, and
Yeah.
Godspeed to him on that.
Absolutely.
Here's what needs to happen. Tony Khan needs to like crack a whip and show some. He's got to talk to the old man, is what he's got to do. Because say what you want about Shad Khan, that dude built an auto parts empire out of the back of a van, right? And you don't do that without picking up some leadership skills along the way,
Yeah.
right? I would, if I were him, I would seriously seek some advice from the old man and see what he has to say. Because you're right, Punk should be suspended because we've set that precedent with Eddie Kingston. What
Yep.
Eddie
And it
Kingston
should
did
be
was much worse, or what he's
yeah.
done was
Well,
much worse than Eddie Kingston did.
yeah, it should be a lot longer
Mhm.
than 2 weeks.
It should be,
I
and you're
I
right.
think
If the EVPs are being this kind of doing this kind of stuff, and they're not playing office, because again, if you punch someone lower ranking than you, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. If I hit a kid,
oh,
I'm fired. You know,
yeah. I go to jail, right?
yeah.
Like, if you know what I mean? So, like, it's against the Uniform Code of Military Justice, for me, to do anything like that. So,
So
I think swift punishment should be coming for those guys. Um,
and I talked to here's a concern. I talked to a person who's like, well, then if the elite get mad, then they go to WWE. And you
Fuck
have
them.
to, I agree 100%. You have to say, go
Yeah.
ahead. Now they're your problem, which is what Vince has said a lot of times when he let
Yeah.
people go. Now they're your problem.
Yep.
So I think you have to say that in this case and let the WWE do an elite reunion, and then you just move on forward. Cause I mean, it couldn't be their company forever. And Tony Khan's talked about how he seems to have a real issue with people not giving him his credit for things. So there seems to be some ego things there. I think you got to I think if they're willing to go, you got to be willing to say peace. And you're going to have some people that are angry with you, your fans, but you got to, if you produce a good show, they're going to come back.
Always. And you don't want your company to hinge on just a couple of people, right? If you do that, then you have failed as a leader, you failed as a manager and a content creator. One of my mottos, and we got less than 2 minutes left. So, but one of my mottos is being a leader, and my job is to groom people to take my place. If I leave and everything falls apart, I suck at
You
my
failed.
job. Right.
Mhm.
I took off last week and they did not skip a beat. And it's not because they're better off without me. It's because I don't suck at what I do. I set them
Mhm.
up for success. They know what decisions to make. And if they have an issue, they can call me and I can walk them through it. And there was an issue last week. And we have WhatsApp. We have a text group. They texted, I gave my opinion, boom. And they had the right answer. I just led them to the right answer, right?
Mhm.
They already knew what the answer was, but they just needed me as that kind of like a safety net. But I feel confident in them that even if they didn't text me, that I made the right choice, right? And the same thing applies here. If CM Punk gets fired tomorrow, which is not going to happen, but I think if he does, AEW is going to be fine. Or if the elite, if they get put on the shelf for a little bit and if their contract expires next year and they decide to go to WWE, guess what? They're fine too.
Mhm.
Either way, they're fine. Hopefully, everybody just gets into a room and they hash it all out. They cut the shit. They come together and become a team again, because I think that AEW has an incredible product and they got a great company there, and I hate to see it go to waste.
Eric Bischoff's critical mistake in WCW was assuming that whoever had Hulk Hogan controlled the keys to pro wrestling.
Yep.
He thought that talent was irreplaceable when there's always going to be a top guy.
Always.
And that should be your job, is to make the next one. And I'll say this: Eric Bischoff is not as good a businessman, clearly, as Tony Khan is. Now Tony Khan has to show that he is a better leader. It's on him.
Yep. 100%. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us. Catch us this week on Brace for Impact as we cover Eddie Edwards versus Heath, the big main event there as we head into Victory Road. Hey, I'm sure more news is going to. We're going to talk the Impact show, and then we're also going to talk all the big time news. So don't you worry.
I need someone in Impact to kick somebody behind the screens or something like that.
Can Scott D'Amore get in a little trouble? Right? Can we do something? Like, come on, guys.
We made up a rumor, and that took fire. We can't do this on. It can't be on us every week to make Impact interesting.
Right. Do I got to create some more bullshit online and get Body Slam involved and, Lavi Margolin, who did a whole podcast about what I said?
Mike,
do I got to do that again?
Mike, it's unbelievable that you did that. I keep saying we made this up and nobody rumors are amazing.
Lavi did a whole podcast about it. And he was like, and he goes, and our friend Mike, me and him never met because our friend Mike Gilbert from Fight Game Media, he did say that he was having a little bit of fun, but he makes really good points. I was like, oh no, come on, Lavi. But all right, man.
We should make a phone call about that next week. I don't know.
I think we should. Maybe if things get too boring, we'll make a phone call. All right, everybody. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye.